So this is my wife's fabulous pie dough recipe. So you're going to need 350 grams of all-purpose flour, 25 grams of sugar, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 280 grams of unsalted butter, 3 ounces or 6 tablespoons of cold water, and please make sure that your butter is also super cold. So either grab a pastry blender or do what my wife is doing here, which is use a food processor, which is the much easier way to cut your fat into your flour. She has her flour on a scale, and so she is taking 2/3 of the flour out, which is 233 grams. You don't have to do it exact, but the more exact you are, the better it will come out. She just dumped her sugar in, her salt. She's going to pop the lid on it now. And what she's going to do is just make sure that all of the dry ingredients are properly mixed up before going forward. Just a couple pulses will do. This is the long process of adding your butter. So she already cut it up into tablespoon size or smaller pieces. And then now she's just adding them piece by piece, making sure that they are slightly separated so they will incorporate into the flour better. The butter is super cold, which is really good because it's going to give you a much flakier crust at the end. It is 280 grams of unsalted butter, which for most people is just 2.5 sticks of unsalted butter. Almost done. Just throw it on in there. Put the lid back on it. And now she's going to start pulsing. So the reason that you want to pulse and that you don't want to actually just let the food processor run is because every time you pulse, it kind of pops everything back up and it doesn't let it make like a homogeneous kind of mass. A homogeneous mass will spread the butter completely through the flour, and even though that may sound nice, having little flecks of butter in your flour when the pie dough bakes will make them melt and create layers, which will create flakiness, which is what you really want to do. So periodically she's going to check to make sure that it's all kind of like falling off the sides. She's going to check the texture. She might give the blade a little spin, which she's doing right now. It's looking really good. So you kind of want it to look like sand with little pebbles of butter inside. Most of the time when you're doing the biscuit method in my class, I'm always telling you that you want it to look like small peas. With this recipe, you actually want it to be a little smaller than that. Half size to maybe even slightly smaller. So there you go. It's starting to look like really, really coarse sand. And at this point, she's going to be pouring the rest of her flour in, that last little bit of all-purpose flour. This was actually recorded in 2020 during lockdown, and I just never got around to taping it, or to finishing it, I should say. But so what she's doing now is she's just incorporating the rest of that flour, making sure that it's one mass. If you notice, it only took a couple little pulses. It might work a little better in this smaller bowl than what we have at school, because it keeps everything kind of like in a small area. Our larger food processor bowls at school spread everything out a little bit, and it actually might take a little bit more pulses than 25. So at this point, she needs to add the water. So do not add the water in the food processor. Make sure that you are pouring it into the bowl. And then she's going to grab her tablespoon. So you can do this one of two ways. You can either weigh out your water, which would be 3 ounces, or you can do it by volume, and you can do 6 tablespoons. So I did speed the video up slightly right here, which is why she is going so fast. But add all 6 tablespoons. Also, Most pie doughs, they tell you to do it by feeling, like how much the flour needs. Her recipe is based off of America's Test Kitchen, which uses exactly 6 tablespoons every single time. And so please do not add any more water than is recommended. And then at this point, all that she's doing, she's not kneading it because that would overwork the dough. She's just using a rubber spatula, just keep turning, keep turning, keep turning. And what that's going to do, if you keep watching, is it's going to start looking like a shaggy dough, which is, if you make yeast spreads, it's when the dough first starts to come together. And if you notice, see how there's no flour down at the bottom of the bowl at this point? That's a very good thing. So she's going to clean off the rubber spatula at this point, and then she's going to start just pushing it together. And at this point, since there's no flour at the bottom of the bowl, she knows that this dough will hold together. Now, it will still crack, and I think you'll see in a second where the dough kind of looks like it wants to crack in half. That's okay. It needs to rest in the refrigerator for 30 to 60 minutes. So she's just going to collect all the dough in one mass. She's going to throw it on the scale. She's going to see how much it weighs. And then she's going to divide that number by 2 so she gets 2 equal pie doughs. And this recipe makes 2 12-inch pies. So if she knows if she gets the dough even, that it'll be like a consistent thickness if she rolls it out to 12 inches. And then all that you want to do is kind of push it down into a disc. Try and keep the disc about 1 inch thick. And then, because if you keep it like in a circle and keep it at 1 inch, it'll be a lot easier when you go to roll it. And then just put it in the fridge for 30 to 60 minutes. We are back, and it is 4 years later. I never finished this video, so we're going to give it a shot of picking up where my wife left off 4 years ago. This is the mise en place that you will need to roll out the pie dough. Obviously, this is a different pie dough. I have my dough. I have a rolling pin, which is my wife's old rolling pin, a marker. You can be a pen or a pencil, it doesn't really matter. A ruler, and a pie dish. This is a 9-inch throwaway pie dish. If I was doing this at home, obviously I'd use a real pie dish, but because we're selling it, these are fake ones. So and I also have this large piece of parchment paper, which you are going to use because this is going to make it easy to keep it round and make it the right size that you want. The first thing that you are going to do is you're just going to put a dot in the middle of your piece of paper, of parchment paper. And then you're going to take your ruler and you're going to put it, that will say east to west, on the 6-inch mark. And then you are going to mark 0 and you are going to mark 12 because we are going to make a 12-inch pie dough, which is actually a little bigger than we need it, but it will give us the right thickness. And then I'm going to go north-south with the dot still on 6 inches. I'm going to mark 12, I'm going to mark 0, and then you go in between. And then you go between the other way. And like I said, you can use a pen or a pencil. The only reason that I am doing a marker is to make it easier to see on video. And then you literally just connect the dots. Just work your way around. It doesn't need to be too pretty. And then one of the most important parts is to turn the paper over. Because the last thing that you want is to have your dough actually touching the marker, because the marker is now on the other side. And so I have some tape. Masking tape works really good. Unfortunately, at home I don't have regular masking tape. I only have painter's tape. You want to make sure that you get this paper as tight as possible. And as you can see, that just pulled right up. So let me just get this. There you go. Okay, now that we have our paper down, and I'm not sure it's going to stay because this parchment paper that we get now is actually really slick. I have my pie dough. I made this pie dough earlier today. It sat in the refrigerator. I let it sit out for the past half an hour. You know you always have a good pie dough if you can see flecks of fat in it. And they're still like little, I don't know, nubs or balls or whatever you want to call them. And they're not rubbed into the dough. And so I also need to get a 1/4 cup of flour. So I have my 1/4 cup of flour. You don't need a lot. Just shake a little bit over top of where you're working. The idea is to make the pie dough slide. You don't want to add extra flour to the dough. Just a little bit on the bottom, a little bit on top. I like to call it conversational snow that people like to talk about but doesn't really do much. And then I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go down. And a couple things is, one, you don't want to roll off the edge. You want to roll to the edge. And two, don't roll too far too fast. A little bit at a time works really well. It keeps it round, it keeps it nice. The edges are going to crack, and that is perfectly okay. So I went up and down, and now I'm going to spin it. And look how it's already picking up that flour. You want to make sure it slides. So the rule is up, down, turn, up, down, turn. As long as you keep that cadence, you're going to make sure that your dough is not sticking to the surface, and it's also going to keep it round. So up, down, and actually I'm pushing pretty hard right now because the dough is still a little cold, but that's okay, because as I work it, it's going to get warmer, and you don't want all that butter to melt in there or get smeared. Up, down, turn, up, down, turn, and it's already sticking a little bit more. That's okay. We're also going to, sometimes I call this fudging. You're going to fudge it back into its round form. If you need a little bit more flour just to make it dusty looking, you can do that. Up, down, turn. Up, down, turn. At this point, it's getting a little bit out of a circle, so we're going to make it back into a circle again. We're going to mend all these edges that are starting to crack. If you have a little flat spot right here, you can hold up this side and just press down right there, and that'll make that part of the dough go out and become round. Up, down, turn. Nothing like hitting my camera. Oh. Once you get close, there you go. And it does, like I said earlier, it does not have to be perfect. And then what you can do, there's two ways you can do this. If this is the only one that you are doing, you can just take the whole paper and flip it up onto itself, or get your hand up underneath of it like this and just flip it right over. And then make sure it's kind of centered. You're going to push it down into the corners. Not quite centered. There we go. I'm going to grab a knife. And then if this is where the edge is, right there. You want to do a double edge. So I go out if here to here and then to here and just cut that part off. Now, if you were doing like a top and a bottom, you could literally just rub the knife against the edge of the pan and it would cut very, very nicely. And if it's a little shy of halfway, that's okay. You don't want too much dough around the edge. Like right here, I'm a little shy, but that's okay. Still gonna look really nice. Fix a crack. And there you have it. And then we're going to make a double edge because we don't want the edge to brown too quickly while we bake it. And so by making a double edge, it's going to increase the mass of it and it will make it cook. It'll take longer to cook. So all I'm going to do is, if you can see that, is fold it under and press it down, just like that. So fold it under, press it down, fold it under, press it down, and it should have a nice edge like that. Fold it under, press down, and you're just going to work your way around. It doesn't take very long. There you go. Has a nice edge on it. I don't know if you can see that. If it's a little thick in places, you can kind of press it down like Play-Doh right now. And then you can leave it just like this and it will bake up looking really, really nice. If you want to do a fork edge, grab a fork. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think they go in from the outside. You want the fork to be towards the inside. And because then that gives you a little barrier on the outside and it looks nicer. I mean, it's kind of like a home look. Like honestly, if I was selling these, I think I'm just gonna leave this just like this. If you wanna do a fork, you just press it in and work your way around. I think this looks kind of iconic for a pumpkin pie. There you have it. This is perfect for anything from an apple to a pumpkin to a pecan to whatever you want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back in the fridge to get the butter all cold again, because you want the butter super cold. When it goes into the oven, that's going to give you that real flaky pie crust. And that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed.